So, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon's session. My name is Richard Rees. I am the Account Director for CSTEM, dealing in the healthcare division, amongst other divisions as well. And today the topic that we'll be discussing is digital asset registers and how to manage the challenges around real-time inventory, classification, behaviour, and the monitoring of that as well. So to start off, STEM stands for Systems and Techniques, equals Effective Management. And at CSTEM, we are very much passionate about ensuring that all our technologies and services are tailored to business outcomes. So we do provide best of breed technology and services, but we provide it with a consultative approach, diagnose before you prescribe, to help you confidently match the right technology to the needs, avoid tech clash, and versus the typical tick box exercises on features. So in today's session, we will be giving an overview of what other NHS organisations have already successfully adopted after going through that diagnose then prescribe process for tackling the challenges that they faced. We do passionately believe in the views of the community are important, so we will be conducting a few polls through today's session at various points if you could take part and participate. I hope you enjoy the session today. Our goal is, after today, you'll leave with a clear understanding of what we do, why we do it, where we fit, and the benefits of working with us. Our aims are quite simple: to help organisations realise optimised outcomes whilst reducing overheads and avoiding compromises in risk. What we find is all NHS organisations are engaged on digital strategies. Some are more mature than others, some are at the start of their journey. But whatever stage of the journey that you're at, the primary challenge is common, and that is modernising architecture without compromising acceptable level of risks, especially where some reports are indicating that there's been a 123% rise in ransomware across the healthcare sector in the last year alone. So where we fit, all NHS will have technology in place for monitoring performance and risk, and we complement that. We complement it by not conflicting with the legacy technology that you have or getting in the way of existing projects. We simply help organisations bridge the gap between how effective they currently are and how effective they need to be. So at this stage, we'll look to introduce our first poll questions, because we find that most organisations have a need to accelerate development in the areas that they're working in, yet have concerns over delays on existing projects and whether they can utilise the technology they already have. So at this point, I'd like to ask my colleagues to pull up the first poll question. So when introducing new technology to improve business outcomes, how important is maximising value from existing technology? So we'll just give a few moments for people to respond, and we will be sharing the results at the end of the webinar from today's sessions. So I'd like to ask my colleague, thank you for that. If we can just move on to the next slide. So what we do. Several years ago, CSTEM stopped being a little bit of everything to everyone, as I think a lot of people in the industry try to be. And we focused our priorities and areas into key expertise, which is CrowdSmart and CloudSmart toolkits. Each of these modules has a role to play, and in terms of bridging the gap in overall effectiveness. The reason we select these areas is because they all directly impact digital transformation outcomes. So as well as being dependent on each other for maximum effectiveness of each of the areas, they also carry vital component parts in ensuring maximum output from each module. So an example of that, if you're going to tackle email security and file transfer, it's important you understand your data management aspects and where all your sensitive data is held. If you're looking to tackle LAN, WAN, and cloud, it's important to understand application performance and how your key apps are going to perform and the impact that has on user productivity. So all of our modules, we see organisations either taking them independently because they have services in place, or adopting other modules at the relevant time within their journey. So today we're going to be discussing the topic of cybersecurity and asset detection. So three main distinct areas of the challenges with digital assets in healthcare. One is devices can't accommodate a security agent. So these are IoT devices. These are devices that fall outside of the normal remit of security products. Secondly, you've got those devices that use other protocols of communication, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, radio frequencies, and again, beyond the scope of traditional security tools. A third aspect is these sophisticated devices. So we look at MRI scanners. They're based on vulnerable operating systems such as 2000, Windows XP, Windows 7. And so cybersecurity tools aren't necessarily geared to identify the malware on these devices, and quite often limited in terms of patching using normal IT systems isn't always feasible. Then you have other devices such as patient monitors, infusion pumps, etc. They use embedded real-time operating systems, and securing fixes on these devices is even more complicated. So another challenge is digital asset registers. We know obviously that there's currently a drive by NHS Digital over the next 12 months to promote the digital asset registers for organisations, but we see that they're typically recorded and managed by separate divisions within the organisation. So that obviously for different reasons, you have the accounting, which speaks for itself. You have estates and facilities, which look after the operational side of things. So you're looking at the pat testing of these devices. And then you've got the IT, which have traditional IT assets. But the challenge comes where you're looking to apply risk and governance across all of those assets, especially where IT don't have full ownership of those asset registers. Quite understandably so, because there are operational permutations of the other departments not having access to that. So this time is another poll time question. So please get ready to submit your answers. So if my colleague could finally raise this, thank you. Does ownership of asset registers across departments add complexity to the managing of risk of those digital assets? Simple yes or no choice. So we'll just give people a minute to respond to this. So my thanks to my colleague. I think that's enough time. Simple answer choice on that one. We can move on. So today, as part of our smart services portfolio, we are introducing Armis. So Armis is a purpose-built for this kind of environment of unmanaged and unagentable devices. They're well established and recognised for helping solve the challenges associated with this. So CSTEM, working in association with Armis, have been working with STPs or ICSs, as they now are, and deploying these solutions across NHS Trusts. The common aim of these ICS groups was to simplify the establishment of a standard and common approach amongst the community for identifying, managing and communicating risk, very much aligned with the approach of the NHSD and the development of the modern care dashboard. So today we'll be looking at the asset inventory, so looking at devices where you can't install agents. We'll be looking at network segmentation, where you can base it on device type, behavior, and risk. Looking at vulnerability management, so looking to ensure that it won't disrupt services, that you can immediately identify devices when they come onto the network. And then also looking at the detection and the response. So this is where, if we go back to the WannaCry environment, which had obviously severe impacts, you would be able to quickly identify all compromised or vulnerable devices and take the necessary actions from this. So at CSTEM, we have a proven approach, as we mentioned earlier. So we've built specific processes around ensuring that you've got that confidence and qualification of the fit. So if we're looking at digital asset visibilities we're discussing today, you can more easily and successfully look at the implementation of the goals needed to do that. So tackling this head on with a diagnose before you prescribe approach ensures that you'll avoid redundant investment, you can get ongoing sustainable value, and quite importantly, reduce the overhead and the management of that risk, whilst also then improving stakeholder communications. So it's important at this point, I think, to mention that we don't conflict with any strategic goals that has been set by the organisation or the NHSD that are trying to be achieved. We simply take a consultative approach to qualifying that the implementation of those outcomes will be achieved. So this works particularly well within communities that we've already touched on, where members have already trodden that path, carried out due diligence, and this can then be translated to a 70 to 80% commonality across the community, leaving then a 20 to 30% variable that's specific to your organisation, thus reducing the overhead of qualifying the right fit on the technology and the selection process. So before we hand over to our CrowdSmart Services technology partner, Armis, today, it's poll time again. So I'd just like to ask my colleague to bring up another one of our poll questions. How confident are you in reporting an up-to-date cyber posture of all connected digital assets at any given time? Which is quite often the case that we see, especially when board level and execs say we want to know what our posture is because something's hit the news, we want to know where we stand. So if you can just take a moment to answer that, and then we can look to move on. I'll hand over to my colleague. So thank you for that poll question. I think we're ready to move on. And at this stage, I'd like to introduce a colleague, Anthony Smith, who's going to walk you through some of the platform features and the capabilities that have been adopted by some of the NHS organisations. We talked about that trodden path that's been taken, and Anthony will give you a bit of an overview, and I'll come back in later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone. I believe that I've got Zoom working correctly. So I will begin taking you through the Armis offering. So let me go and talk about the landscape and the challenge. So there's been a massive transformation in the number of connected devices at organizations. As we can see from this chart, and I use this chart a lot, talk to it a lot, it always resonates. So if we follow this bar graph over the last 10 years, and that pretty much brings us up to where we are now, we can see the acceleration in the growth of connected devices. So talking about 25 billion plus this year, and that's only going to increase. And we all think about personal devices, let alone the types of actions which are being automated in medical environments. And also a lot of those devices are now, in addition, being connected. So whereas previously they may have been either standalone or non-digital, they're being digitized and connected. There's many advantages to that, of course, but that brings some risk. So when we look at these devices, just in a general term, 90% of these devices are unmanaged. So what do I mean by unmanaged? Devices where you can't put a traditional agent, you're not going to put an antivirus tool on them. Laptops are managed. Those classic IT devices, they're easier to get visibility on, but they're a shrinking component of when compared to the number of devices. And of course, these devices are serving a huge range of functions. So whether that's industrial control, medical devices, security cameras, lighting. And what's interesting when I've been working with hospitals and healthcare trusts and NHS Trusts, of the three areas that Armis has broken out device catalog and device types into, which we would call corporate or classic IT devices, industrial, and medical devices, and we have teams specializing in all of them. The medical environment is the only one where we see all three of those groups. But of course, hospitals have traditional laptops and traditional corporate IT devices. And of course, you're going to have predominantly medical devices. But interestingly, we're seeing some what we call ICS or industrial control systems. So door controls. You have ambulances, big vehicles to store. You have doors to move. Plus all the HVAC heating systems. So that was interesting to me a year ago to see all three types of the devices that we specialize in grouped together in the medical environment. It's the only one. For example, we don't see MRI scanners in industrial environments. For them, it's robot arms and building stuff. Of course, with all these different device types, they're not designed with security or management in mind. They're designed with operational efficiency or to help patients. And therefore, unfortunately, in the real world, means they increase risk at organizations, both for cybersecurity and for continuity of patient care. But they can't be protected like traditional devices. You can't install antivirus on them. So the enormous growth in these new devices has opened up a much larger attack surface at organizations, and bad actors have taken note and exploiting this. You see increasing stories in the press across all range of different organizations. And yet, when we look at frameworks and classic cybersecurity approaches, the risk of not having an asset register has been called out for years. It's just been either not properly adopted or too hard to do. And it's getting very hard to do now with the proliferation of these types of devices. So when we talk about NIST, for example, calls out identity as its first pillar, Centre for Internet Control. UK NIS is the framework behind a lot of UK government-driven frameworks, and they all call out know your assets, know your hardware, inventorize your assets in your environment as a foundation pillar, normally the first thing to do. But of course, that visibility starts with knowing what's connected to your organization. And that is the biggest problem with all these devices. They're invisible. So let's talk about how Armis solves this. So let's start with Armis. Armis if we think about how Armis works, so it's an agentless device security platform. So what do I mean? So you don't need to go and start installing multiple agents and all the work that is involved in doing that. It's too hard. And in the majority of these types of devices, you couldn't install an agent anyway. So just going down that traditional route for device discovery keeps you blind to 90% a bunch of your devices. So we don't use any endpoint agents. And this makes us simple to deploy, makes us passive, and we can do continuous monitoring. So we're not active, we're not at risk, we're not doing risky scans in your environment, particularly important in a medical environment. And if we break Armis capabilities down into categories, we can break it into these three functional categories. So discover all assets, identify risks and gaps, and automate enforcement. So if we think about the discover all assets, so really that is asset inventory. And if you aggregate this up, elevate this up to classic security questions, we're really looking to help you answer three classic security questions, which is, what do I have, as in discover all assets? What are the things I need to worry about, care about, identify the risks and gaps? What am I going to do about it? And that enforcement options, which probably is going to be raising a ticket in a medical environment. You're not likely to start automating removal of devices from the network. So when we dive into asset inventory, what does Armis give you? Well, it gives your organization real-time asset inventory. So we will discover and identify all devices connected to your organization. So that can be managed and, importantly, unmanaged. So wired and wireless, everything from your classic corporate desktop all the way through to MRI scanner, medical devices. And we're going to have a look at some of those when we get to the demo. But of course, just discovery is not enough. So it's the context that matters. And with Armis, we provide a full understanding of device context, so including the make, model, operating system, version, applications, potential vulnerabilities, network activities, risks, so everything you need for proactive security and everything you need to help figure out the device-based risk in your organization, which can help you feed up into a strategic board level risk view. And in a couple of minutes, once I finish this slide, we'll be asking a poll about that. So I'm just getting you ready for that. So with Armis, the immediate access to that kind of context information is critical visibility. So that can really help you security individuals or security teams respond to those alerts faster. It makes you more efficient. That's one of the biggest challenges of security analysts, professionals, of which there's never enough of feet on the ground to do that, whether you are an enormous bank with a huge investment in security, or a small NHS trust who maybe has one or two people probably overworked and tasked with multiple tasks. Anything that can help you get to a decision around cybersecurity quicker as to what to prioritize is important, and we're hearing that from the field. So, and a great example of this would be enabling security analysts to immediately find out the actual device an IP address maps to. So you may have an alert, typically a classic SIM syslog alert, you'll have an IP address. What is the device? Well, how do you find that out? That can take anywhere from hours to days. With Armis, you can drop the IP address into the console and we'll tell you exactly what that device is and the context about it. So you can go and find it, you can decide what the risk is, do you need to do something about it? Or is it if it's a new device, for example, seemingly pulling in a load of gigabytes of traffic, is it just a mobile device looking for an update? If you just have an IP address, you don't know. If you know what the device is, you can make a judgment and say, I don't need to worry about that, that's expected. Whereas if it's a security camera streaming out a load of video that you weren't expecting, then that may be a risk and you need to go and find it. So we do this by pulling together multiple vulnerability databases, security bulletins, FDA advisories, ICS certs, and other device manufacturing intel, and plugging that into the device for context, and therefore answering the question, what are the things I need to worry about around risk and management? Then from a response point of view, so you can automate things like raising tickets, you can send alerts to your SIM, so we support syslog. If you have a SOAR tool, we can orchestrate the playbook in SOAR as well. So I'm going to stop at this point and just invite my CSIM colleagues to raise up the next poll question.
Yeah, so thank you on that, Anthony. And this is actually a two-part question. So the first question, alongside the operational reporting capabilities, how important do you rate being able to access on-demand or scheduled strategic reporting to support board-level discussions around risk? So if we could all just have a little think about that and then submit our answers. And then I think we'll move on to part two. So thank you. If we can move on to the second part of this question. So part two of this question is related to time and resource. So how demanding on time and resource is it to identify, collate, understand, and translate that cyber risk at board level? And again, if we can just take a moment to have a think about that and then submit our answers, and I think then we'll hand back to Anthony. Okay, thank you for that. And I think on that note, that'll conclude that part of the question and the poll. And I think we'll hand back to Anthony now for the remainder of his presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. So I've been through, from a strategic point of view, the problem with solving and how we solve it, and the poll's really looking at the how you assess the value of solving those problems. So let's talk about how Armis actually does this in a little bit more detail. So how do we deploy? So Armis, by design, is very simple to deploy. So we can see here the two main Armis components. So we install a collector, and that can be virtual or physical on your network. Whilst everyone's used to thinking virtual is the future, what we're finding is actually many organizations prefer just a box, and this is a small one rack unit switch to just something simple to plug in, don't have to think about it, stick in the network and forget. So that's why we offer both. But if you're confident with the with your own, let's say VMware or whatever virtual environment you have, then of course we can provide exactly the same functionality in a virtual collector. And that will connect into multiple network integrations. So if we look here, we can see we want to connect into your switch infrastructure. This would be at the core, so that we can take a port mirror. So in Cisco speak, that will be a span from your core switch. It may be that you, with multiple sites, you have more than one core. So that would mean, you know, maybe 2, 3 collectors, which is what we're seeing on NHS Trusts we're deployed at as well, certainly some of the larger ones. We also want to be able to integrate with a switch and query it for SNMP. So we want to be able to look up those MAC addresses and link them to IP addresses, which will be the case in routed networks, which you will have. And we also want to connect to your wireless LAN controller to see what is in the airspace. So of course, the BYOD devices, you'll have some MDM tool, or you'll be acquiring one soon. Managed devices, you'll have some kind of endpoint protections, you know, SoFast, CrowdStrike, something like that. But that data will be siloed in, easy to get, but in separate places. So we can also ingest that and provide you with that in a single point of reference for all of your assets. Furthermore, we can now integrate with AWS, GCP, Azure to pull in any cloud asset information. But here's the hard stuff, the 90%. So the unmanaged IoT and medical devices. So there's not going to be an agent. So we'll be able to see the network traffic and tell you what they are. We'll identify what they are, and we'll talk a bit about how we do that in the next coming slides, and we will be getting to a demo. Off-network devices. This is interesting and raises questions. So what do we mean by that? So these are devices which are in the airspace, they're within the organization space, their SSID is being sent, so it's beaconing out. These access points will see them, but they're not connecting to your network. So we're still able to identify the device, tell you what they are, tell you any at least potential risks around the device type, OS versions, and you know that they're in your organization space. Use case could be leased equipment, leased MRI scanner with a 4G connection, so it's not going via your network, but it is in your building, or some security cameras where they're not connecting in via your network, but they're sending video images out. So you would want to know about that from a risk management point of view. Furthermore, if we look up here, we can connect, and there's just some examples, we can connect with existing security solutions. So we can connect to firewalls and pull data from firewalls. We can connect and interact with NAC, so Cisco ICE, for example. We can furnish Cisco ICE with our device inventory. NAC tools find it very difficult. They're not built to do a good job on inventory. They're built for AAA access control to the network, but one of the problems that we've seen for years, getting them deployed usefully, is getting that accurate device info into them, and often you end up doing port whitelisting. That does somewhat render the NAC device a little bit pointless. So, and this is a common theme. I know CSTEM have a lot of experience deploying various different types of flavors of NAC. And we can integrate with SIM. So we can push all of our alerts via syslog to any SIM. They all talk syslog. We can also have tight integrations with Exabeam, so that's two-way integration, and with Splunk, both of which you may well have in your environment. So let's talk about some additional solutions. So we've talked about the firewall, NAC, and SIM. We also can integrate with whether that's your EDR tool, CrowdStrike, whether that's Microsoft Intune for MDM, vulnerability management to enhance our reporting of vulnerabilities, integrate with identity management, endpoint management. All of these different feeds give us different attributes and allow us to consolidate a better inventory and a more detailed view of all the devices, which is at your fingertips. So what is critical, of course, to doing this is you have to have a list of what those devices are. So because we're not active, we're listening and making a decision based on algorithms from data that we're taking from the network. So that leads us into the Armis device knowledge base, and that's a key part of the Armis solution. It is a critical differentiator from other competitors for us. And you can think of it as a giant crowdsourced, cloud-based device behavior knowledge base. So the largest in the world, tracking over 600 million devices, and that's always growing as we're adding new customers and new devices, breaking that down into about 12 million individual device profiles. And each device profile will detail things like how often the device communicates, over what protocols, how much data is typically transmitted, whether the device is stationary, for example, and medical carts move around. People tend to put things in, we are aware, and you will be aware from a medical point of view, that no doubt well-intentioned medical staff, if important technology is short, may well store that somewhere for future emergency. And whilst the intent is probably good, it's not good practice for managing patient throughput and managing the medical devices in your environment. And that is a common use case that we come across. So with our device knowledge base, not only do we understand what the device is, and we'll see that when we look at the demo, but what is it doing? Where is it connecting to? And you can think about what it should be doing. And that's because we understand the context of each device and its use in the environment, because we learn that. So if we think about, what is a tablet really? Multiple uses of tablets. They could be used to check people in an office entrance, could be driving video conferencing a solution, or running or running patient records, used by a doctor in an emergency room. So that context is really critical. That deep device knowledge that Armis enables Armis to properly classify the devices and to do threat detection with a high degree of accuracy. So we're looking at comparing real-time device state and behavior to known good baselines for similar devices. When you think about the numbers that we just talked about in the device cloud, that scale matters, and that allows us to give that additional context. We can provide you the capability to generate your own policies and report on policy violation, which could be as simple as a misconfiguration or abnormal behavior. So something in unusual or unexpected DNS requests. I mean, we've seen a case, we often talk about it, of an MRI scanner connecting to Facebook, and that seems an unlikely place for MRI scanners to be visiting. Clearly that was a user, it was a Windows device, and someone had worked that out and was using, it's not malicious, but it's risky, and they shouldn't be using the terminal on an MRI scanner to check some Facebook updates. Okay, I'm going to switch to the console now, and let us have a look at I'm going to start with a dashboard view. So we can see here, this is a global view with various, this bar here, KPIs, so KPI numbers, number of devices that we've seen in this data set, risky devices, this is what Armis considers risky devices, threat activities and various unhandled alerts. You could also forward those to your SIM if you didn't want to handle them here. If we look at the top line, Armis has a search bar, we call it Armis standard queries, ask for short. We can see here, this is designed to be easy to use. You can customize and build your own searches. You can save searches, have a list of recent searches. And this really brings the power of the information together, because the ability to actually, we all generate a lot of information, but it's the ability to search and consume that information easily and quickly that matters. You can break this down into sites. So we've got country level here, but this could be a specific NHS trust. And then you could subdivide this into, if you have more than one hospital site, for example, and we see that a lot. And then boundaries, this is Armis language for network boundaries. So what are the network segments, what are the VLANs, how you describe them. And of course, there's a time, you can slice the data response by time. If we look down here, we've got various dashboards, and you can control these dashboards because we support single sign-on, connecting to SAML. So it could be that you want to customize different dashboards with different views. So you could have a asset management view designed for board level reports, where it's very easy for you to bring up either in a meeting live or just to snapshot the report and take that with you. These devices, these reports relate to a search. So a search will be generated up here, saved as a report, then added as a dash there. And you can customize these yourself. So we have built a library of them for different types of use cases to make it easy, or you can build your own customized one and specify which type of graphic best suits the data that you're presenting. So we can see mainly bar graphs and pie charts here. Let's take, and we can see here one built specifically for medical devices, for example, and some federal FDA certified devices, recall devices. So you could pick these to suit your own particular use case. So let's go to inventory. I'm going to select medical, and we're going to go in and just go straight into an inventory view for medical devices. So we will come back and look at some of the things we can do with classic IT devices as well, which you will all have and clearly are a risk you need to manage as well. So we can see here with some risk factors, a couple of alerts. We can see the name of the device, the data source. So what data source did Armis get this from? So in this case, span traffic inspection. So if we think about the deployment here, so this would be the port mirror or span traffic collection. So that's what the magnifying glass denotes to. Also, and this is an integration with Nivolo, which is quite widely used as a CMDB type of tool in medical environments. So we can pull and push data there. And if we just go in, and I'll show you what. So this is this is some integrations in this data set. But if I want to add more, so I can go in here. It's very simple, deliberately designed to be easy to use. So if I wanted to add, let's say, Silence, which is an endpoint protection, once I had done the changes on the Silence side to get the API keys, I could plug those in here, and I would then be pulling data directly into Armis, for example. We can see here the switch, the span port is connected as well, so that also is an integration. So let's go back to the inventory view. We've categorized the devices. We've told you the type. So from a context point of view, the model number, brand, tagged them with a relevant boundary, of course, MAC address, IP address, the site, the relevant site. And we can see some tags giving us, which are fully searchable. You can add your own tags, and we can tag these automatically as well. So let's go and have a look at this device here. So if we look at this is an X-ray scanner, we can see there is some risk associated with this device. It's running Windows, the data source, it's from the network traffic only, IP address, MAC address, the basics, the site, what network device saw it, when was it first and last seen by Armis. And I can minimize that, just start having a look at wider information in here. We can see what network activities this device has been doing. So we've got both, whether if there's a relevant vulnerability, then we will update that in here as well. We can see from a device utilization point of view what the device has been doing, and we can see some potential risks here. So unencrypted public health information, where has the device been connecting to? I can expand this, for example, and go into content and start to break this out into a little bit more information available on this screen. We will read the DICOM protocol, so we can tell you what device, what this device has been configured for. And actually, we've now broken out from, if we look at this utilization page, now broken out devices, so we can see inside DICOM and tell you what this device has been doing. So you can see configuration. Now this is more about throughput, patient throughput. And we got asked to do this last year at the US hospital. When we queried why, they said, well, it's actually more about production, the patient throughput and efficiency in the hospital. Okay, yeah, I'm sure we can do it. So we built this functionality and found it to be very useful across other medical environments. So we've now added that into the product. We will report on potential, and these are potential vulnerabilities. We're not doing an active scan. So these are vulnerabilities based on the hardware, the operating system and applications that we're seeing. Risk factors. So this is Armis' take on what are the things you need to know and worry about on the device based on the traffic that we're seeing. So a number of potential high-level risks here that you would probably want to track down and investigate further. Things like SMBv1, so file and print sharing, you may well have, that's the WannaCry risk, but you may well have that well handled with network segregation and firewalling. But we're telling you that there is the potential for that. We're not telling you, you will decide how best you handle it or whether you deem that is actually a risk in your environment. So let's go and have a look at different device sets now. Let's go and have a look at some computers, because you'll see those in your environment as well. And here we can, so these, from a user point of view, these devices are going to be doing more interesting things. So if we go and click on this device here, we can see what the device is. We can see multiple data sources for this device, IP address, MAC address, number of tags for what this device is running, which I can search on all of those as well. We can look at the activities that this device has been running through, both vulnerabilities and network activities. What risk factors have we associated with this device? So multiple risk factors. And we can see what applications this device has been using over the network. So again, we're not active, we're not logging in and querying the registry. And the challenge with active scanning is you need to provide the IP addresses or ranges plus credentials for all those devices. So that's not really discovery, because you already discovered them by telling the tool. But active tools, we're not active, we're passive, so safe in a medical environment. We're not going to be querying the registry and diving in. So these are applications where we're seeing traffic over the network. Now, because I have this level of information, it means I can start to do interesting searches. So I can go through here, for example, and change this. So let's say I change this high-level entity to search on, and we can see the scope of things you can search on to be applications, for example. So pretty straightforward search, shown me all the applications in the environment with a version number and aggregated the devices. So I could click on here and go and have a look at the device list that is running WebEx and see what they are, and then go and investigate those further. I could ask a different question. So let me go in and change this to operating systems. So that's now telling me the operating systems that I'm seeing in the environment by version, aggregate the devices. So those are fairly simple and blunt searches. What about if I want to, and I'm going to link, yeah, let me just start this again from the right place. This time I'm going to start with devices. I'm going to link this to operating systems, so another high-level search entity, and we'll go for Windows as an operating system in the environment. We'll link this to applications, and we will go for, in this environment, our endpoint protection tool of choice is CrowdStrike. So we just asked, show me the devices running Windows, which are running my endpoint protection of choice, which is of use, but of greater use, if I negate that, would be now show me those which are not running my endpoint protection. So show me the gap. So that gives something I can go after from a risk and resilience point of view. And that's a very quickly answered question. I'm going to stop now. I think we have 10 minutes. I'm happy to, I'm sure Richard and I are happy to take questions. If there's anything I can answer live or with the demo, I will. But yes, I'll open this up to, give this back to Richard, who will open this up for questions.
Thank you, Anthony. Before you stop screen sharing, I just wanted to highlight, obviously, with a lot of the NHS trusts that we deal with, DSPT is a main driver for establishing that visibility. Are you able to use any sort of demoing on the tool to sort of relate to how easy it is to manage your DSPT requirements?
Yeah, so from when we talk, I mean, DSPT reporting, right? You've got bi-yearly audit, so you need to respond. And part of that will be tell me about my assets. And if you have a tool that you can quickly query, give you information about your assets, potential vulnerabilities, particularly if you integrate this with, if you're running vulnerability scanner in your environment, can use that to update. It should shorten the time to building out, answering questions and building out the report for you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think at this point, do we want to stop screen sharing? Yes. Okay, so thank you for that, Anthony. I think what we'll do is just recap on some of the things that we've discussed here today. So fundamentally what we're talking about is complete visibility of all your managed and unmanaged devices, improved audit and regulatory compliance, real-time and continuous assessment of your vulnerabilities. It's about improving your risk posture and improving that business continuity and patient operations. So at this point, what I'd like to do, we have had a couple of questions, by the way, which I'll come back to answering at the end. I'd like my colleagues to share some of the results of the poll questions that we put out earlier on. So perhaps we can lead in with the results of the first poll question. Oh, interesting. So when introducing new technology to improve business outcomes, how important is maximizing value from existing technology? And we have 100% responding that it is yes, and it's a high of high importance. So as expected, to be fair. So if we can share the next question, please, on the polls. Does ownership of asset registers across departments add complexity to managing the risk of digital assets? And again, 100% of the people on the webinar today have responded yes. So thank you for that. If we can have the next one, please. How confident are you in reporting an up-to-date cyber posture of all connected digital assets at any given time? 25% have said reasonably, but a rather alarming 75% have responded not at all. So I think that's an indication that there are challenges there that need to be prioritised. So can we have the next question, please? Alongside the operational reporting capabilities, how important do you rate being able to access on-demand or scheduled strategic reporting to support those board level discussions? We've got 67% reporting that to be of high importance and 33 reporting medium importance. So can we have the next question, please? Currently, how demanding on time and resource is it to identify, collate, understand and translate cyber risk at board level? It's a bit of an equal split here amongst the audience. We've got a 50% saying it's extremely demanding, and we have 50% saying quite demanding. Thank you for sharing those results. I think what those results are indicating is that there are common challenges across the NHS organisations. There are challenges with competing demands on time and resource, communications of risk at board level, and fundamentally the digital asset register being visible. And as Anthony quite clearly explained today, being able to quickly demand, with on-demand access, be able to know what's on your network. So just to do a summary, CSTEM is very much a relationship and business outcome focused. We deliver quick time to value, regardless of whatever stage of the journey that you're at. We have some people on the call that are very much at the beginning of introduction to CSTEM. We have some that have gone partway through that diagnose, then prescribe approach that we talked about, and are looking at the technical fit. And ultimately, just a reminder that we provide complementary and non-disruptive services. So in terms of next actions, before we move on to a couple of questions, Q&A that have come through. So qualifying and evidencing the fit actually aligned to business outcomes can be two separate things, but our processes are purpose-built to help you achieve both. So as I said, we've got different people at different stages of the journey. and our team will be reaching out to attendees following the call, looking to set up some meetings for some further qualifications and discussions around the challenges that are faced. I know we've got some people who are already requesting one-to-one demos, and we've got 1 or 2 people that are looking at some proof of value exercises that we run, where we come in and we do some exercises within your environments as well. So leading on to that, to finish up, bringing things to a close, we have had a couple of questions come through. So firstly, I think I'll do them in reverse order, because Anthony, I would like to ask your opinion on this one. I think you're best positioned to answer. So we've had a question come through. It says, how long does it take to deploy the Armis solution?
Excellent question. Thank you very much. So it's definitely going to be dependent on the environment and things like change control. It's very easy for any technology to say, yes, we can deploy in a few seconds. When you think about how long it takes to switch, turn a switch on or start software. But what I've definitely found is if you prepare up front and you have the appropriate questions, which of course we have, understanding an organization's change control, doing due diligence on the use cases and the solutions that they want. And because that is really a function of organizing people and organizing meetings, probably a couple of meetings, an initial discussion point just to get people thinking, and then maybe a 2-hour workshop. Once you've collected that information from the Armis side, it's a very simple matter of we spin up a tenant that probably will take less than an hour. We'll ship you a collector, or you can set up a virtual collector. If it's virtual, then it takes as long as it takes you to download. So, a few minutes, virtual collector, you power it up, plug it into your network, make the appropriate network changes. You will know yourself how long your change controls take, and then it's someone on your keyboard making the relevant iOS changes. So typical life cycle of that is probably in reality a few weeks, even though within those weeks it's probably just a few hours of work, is what we're finding, just to get things up and running initially.
That's great. Thank you, Anthony. We do have another question that has come through, and I think I'll probably take a chance to respond to this one. It says, what time frame would you typically expect for realizing the value and full capabilities of the solution? So at CSTEM, we work very hard at what we call an interim operating model and a target operating model. So whilst there are a lot of capabilities of the system, what we tend to find is most organizations will have intermediate needs that they're looking to fulfill. So quite often it's establishing visibility and being able to digest that information, understand and assess what their cyber posture is against those devices, set up some standard operational reporting and some strategic reporting. What we then see as a target operating model that we then work towards is things like integrations. We heard that Anthony talked about integration with Cisco ICE and some of the other sort of technology stacks. So they're the kind of things that we move into once we've established that interim operating model. And again, realized very quickly, as Anthony has already indicated, the target operating model is very much bespoke to each organization that we deal with, depending on what their roadmap is and what their requirements are. So on that note, I don't think we've had any other questions come through. So I think we can look to potentially bring this to a close. It just remains for me to say thank you very much for everybody's attendance today and participation. As we said, the community views are hugely important to tackling that community-driven approach to a common set of challenges and adoption of those approaches. So we will be circulating the questionnaire if others have had time to respond during this or leading up to the intro on this. Great. If not, our colleagues will reach out and we'll be collecting responses on there. And please visit us on LinkedIn. We're always pushing out relevant content. So thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for attending.